destination, just go, so you are risk of JE at least. If you have JE is symptomatic, is 1/3 die and 1/3 have sequelae. 1/3 survive but they not good cognitive. So it's quite recommended vaccine. Polio only if you go to these 3 areas that still have polio is in Nigeria, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. If you go, the pilot, the air crew go to this area, need polio vaccination once, just like a booster. Rabies, because rabies is quite common in this part, also in Thailand. So if long-term stay and then they may expose like bicycling, camping, or occupation activities, maybe exposed to dogs, then you need pre-exposure. So if you have pre-exposure 3 doses, when you get bitten, you don't need really globally. You need only 2 boosters of the vaccine. And when you go to the place where you don't expect they will have maybe immunoglobulin, so you do this pre-exposure immunization. And no people die if they are pre-exposed at least 3 doses, and then long by and then give only 2 doses of vaccine. Nobody died in our series of 30 years. Corona vaccine generally not recommended because it can be prevented with fecal or can be prevented by food and water. But maybe required in those sailors who go ashore in Indonesia and India because they need this certificate that you have this corona vaccine. In general, we don't recommend. Tick-borne encephalitis vaccine is the last vaccine. It's not available in this part of the world, it's only in Europe. And tick-borne is just this area. In Europe, this is Russia, Mongolia, and then Korea. Only this part. But usually we don't go to the forests for you not go hiking in Europe. We go touring to some other place. So for those European only they go trekking. So conclusion, I just mentioned about the increasing number of travelers this year. It's going to be increased more than this. And I think in your country also the same. You're going to have more travel. So you have to know that there are risks during you travel. And these can be prevented. And then this, you have to know about the routine and require and also recommend vaccine for travelers. This is the International Society. There are 2 big societies in the world. One is Asia Pacific Travel Society where I'm president. This is, you click to here, you get free membership free. You click to this website. And then there is another International Society of Travel Medicine. These have a meeting every other year, so 2 years. And then you can sit for the International Society of Travel Medicine certificate of travel health to practice for travel. It's going to be every year. Next year, next month going to be in Thailand. You can sit for the exam. If you are good enough, you can sit. This is our meeting next month. It's in the Trail Society in Bangkok. If you are interested about this subject. Thank you very much.
Dr. Marta, can you please go to the other stage to receive your certificate of recognition to be given by Dr. Mel Bamasigan and Dr. Allow me to introduce again our third speaker. He's Dr. Kim Mulholland. He's a Doctor of Medicine from University of Melbourne, a Fellow of the Royal Australasian College of Physicians in Pediatrics, He's an honorary professor of the National Center for Communicable Diseases in Mongolia, an honorary professor of International Child Health, Menzies School of Health Research in Darwin, and a professor of child health and vaccinology from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, London. Friends, let's all welcome Dr. Kim Mulholland to talk on maternal immunization.
Thank you very much, and I'd really like to congratulate the Pediatric Infectious Disease Society of the Philippines for their 25 years of fantastic work, and I'd like to say how grateful I am to be invited to come and speak at this important meeting. My task today is to speak about maternal immunization, but before that I want to make a couple of comments about measles. There's been quite a bit of discussion about measles, and it's very clear that at the present time there is a very significant problem with measles in the Philippines. In the first presentation from WHO this morning, you will have noticed that there was a very large epidemic of measles that took place in Mongolia in 2015 and 2016. And there was something very curious about that epidemic. It was an epidemic that included very young children and also older, sort of younger adults, really. But it was in two halves, and the first half was in 2015. The epidemic sort of stopped, and then it took off again in 2016. And the case fatality rate in 2016 was about 10 times what it was in 2015. And there's no good explanation for that, but possibly the best explanation I've seen is it was a coincidence with an epidemic of influenza. So I just put that out there as something to think about as you're controlling the measles epidemic in this country and the influenza season is coming. It seems that for young children, it's possible that the co-infection of measles and influenza might be particularly unpleasant in some children's cases. So that's just a thought to consider. I'm going to speak about maternal immunization, and the first question obviously is why would you vaccinate women during pregnancy? In fact, when I think about maternal immunization, I don't only think about vaccination during pregnancy. I think about vaccination that could take place for young women who may become pregnant, or even after pregnancy, as I'll show you in a minute. But in general, the reasons are firstly to protect the newborn baby in situations where you cannot protect them directly by vaccination. Secondly, to protect the mother in cases of conditions that are particularly bad for pregnant women. And then for much of the world, it's a time when women come into contact with the health service, so it's a time for intervention. So that's also an important factor, particularly in Africa. That's not a comprehensive list, but these are a list of logical maternal immunization targets. And you can see on the first list the protection of the newborn. And I'm going to speak about these ones. I won't be speaking about Group B streptococcus, but it is very important. And there is work underway at the moment to develop a maternal immunization strategy for Group B strep. And I'll also say a couple of words about protection of the mothers. But firstly, tetanus. And tetanus has already been discussed in detail today, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail myself. Just to point out that many of us, certainly the more experienced pediatricians here, will probably be familiar with this kind of a condition. It's one of the most disturbing things in pediatrics is to look after a child with this condition. And neonatal tetanus is definitely something to be avoided. But for me, the interesting thing about this is the way that we came upon maternal tetanus immunization as a strategy. And there were two key studies. One was conducted in Papua New Guinea and one was conducted in Bangladesh. And here is some data from a study conducted in Bangladesh in 1974. It was a randomized trial of 93,000 individuals, adults, and they were randomized to receive either cholera vaccine or a control vaccine. And in this case, the control vaccine was diphtheria and tetanus. And in an analysis at the end of the study, incidentally, the cholera vaccine wasn't effective, but an analysis was undertaken on those women who delivered a baby 32 months after the vaccine. So any time during the 32 months after vaccination, they delivered. And when you think about it, that means that they were either pregnant at the time when they were vaccinated, or they became pregnant after they received the vaccine. So it was either vaccination during pregnancy or vaccination prior to pregnancy. And the striking thing was this 1/3 reduction in neonatal mortality rate. You can see the neonatal mortality rate in the cholera group, 60 was probably about average for Bangladesh at that time. But in the two groups that received tetanus, either one dose or two doses, the neonatal mortality rate was reduced by about 1/3. And that was a striking finding, and I'll show you now a graph from that study. And this graph really tells the story. The black line represents deaths occurring in the cholera group, in other words, in the group that did not receive the tetanus vaccine. And you can see, firstly, there's a lot of deaths in the first couple of days, which is to be expected. And then it comes up again at the end of the first week, and you have a peak of deaths between 7 and 10 days. And in the group that received the tetanus vaccine, you have actually that second peak is gone. And in fact, this is, in my mind, the first really good example of a vaccine probe study where a vaccine was used to demonstrate what was the etiology of a clinical finding. This demonstrated that peak of neonatal mortality was actually due to tetanus, and it was a fantastic study in my opinion. When we think about tetanus as being something that's associated with underdeveloped parts of the world, particularly with Africa and parts of South Asia and so on. And that's why I'm showing you this picture, which comes from a place called St Kilda. Now people who are familiar with Australia will know that there's a place in Melbourne called St Kilda, which used to be a red light district. But actually, the original St Kilda is this place, and it's located on the Outer Hebrides off the coast of Scotland. It belongs to Great Britain. The reason I'm showing it is because it has, as far as I can see, the highest recorded rate of neonatal tetanus anywhere at any time. And in that community, up to the end of the 19th century, the neonatal mortality rate was actually over 50%. In fact, I didn't believe this, and I went to visit the island a couple of years ago and got some of the old records out, and there's evidence that it was actually higher. It may have been 70 or 80% of deaths. And they all died around 8 days. In other words, they all died from tetanus because this concoction made of bird droppings was being put on the cord. And that was only actually corrected when Britain's first male midwife took over in St Kilda in 1892. So it's a bit of history. But now we see the WHO produces this map with all the countries that have eliminated neonatal tetanus, and that's great, and it would be great if they had eliminated neonatal tetanus. But I draw your attention to the definition at the bottom, which says that elimination is one case out of 1,000 live births. And I'm sorry, I mean, if there's one case out of 5,000 live births occurring in a country, that in my mind, that's not elimination. That's still a problem. So I question the definition, but nevertheless, those countries are to be congratulated for their efforts. So I'll move to the second one now, which is influenza. And this is a maternal immunization target. Has been for a long time, particularly in the United States, where since the 1960s there's been a recommendation to vaccinate women during pregnancy against influenza. And this is done primarily to protect the woman. The recognition was that whilst it's not uncommon that during a major influenza outbreak there is a small number of women who are pregnant at the time who develop very severe disease, finish up in intensive cares, and some will die. This was also the case in Australia and Europe. The safety, I've written safety not questioned, that's actually incorrect. The safety has been monitored, but the safety there's been no doubt about the safety of this strategy. This is vaccination with influenza at any time during pregnancy, according to when the flu season is starting, basically. So there was never much discussion in the old days about infant influenza, but I'll come to that. In 2012, WHO made a recommendation for maternal influenza vaccination, and there's been a variable uptake across the world since then. But there was a series of studies, mostly supported by the Gates Foundation, looking at maternal influenza vaccination in low and middle income countries. And the countries concerned were Mali and South Africa in Africa, and Bangladesh and Nepal in Asia. And not surprisingly, the vaccines prevented clinical influenza in the women themselves by a variable amount between 30 and 70%. It also prevented clinical influenza in the infants. But these are usually, well, these are mild febrile illnesses in most cases, and this was only detected by watching the children carefully and then investigating any febrile illness. So this is mild illness in both cases, and together they didn't present a really compelling argument for those countries. But more interesting is the finding that the incidence of low birth weight was reduced when the vaccine was introduced. And this was particularly seen, or mainly seen in the Asian countries, and especially in Nepal. And those women who were pregnant during the influenza season and were vaccinated had actually better birth weight in their children. And in fact, the implication is that influenza in pregnancy is associated with a reduction in birth weight, which is quite plausible. The third one I want to mention now is pertussis. And this is something which is being very much in the news in my country, in Australia, and in the UK, and perhaps also around the world. But what I want to point out is, once again, this is not a new idea. And actually, the first study I could find of maternal immunisation with pertussis was carried out in New York in 1942. And the important thing here, firstly, is that at this time, it was still considered such a major problem, infant pertussis, that as soon as they got a vaccine, one of the very first things they tried to do was to vaccinate pregnant women. Now, these women were actually given 6 doses of whole cell pertussis vaccine during the 3rd trimester. And when 100 in each group were followed up, and out of 100 vaccinees, there were 8 families in whom there was a confirmed case of pertussis during the first 3 months of the infant's life. That's actually a lot, isn't it? That's 8% of families had a confirmed case of pertussis within a 3-month period. But in the vaccinated cases, in the infants of vaccinated women, there were no cases. Whereas in the controls, there were 6 families in whom there was a confirmed case of pertussis in the family, and 3 of them actually gave the infection to the infants. So here is a very early study that gave reasonably convincing evidence that maternal pertussis vaccination prevents the infection. Most countries in the world have a graph that looks something like this for pertussis, showing that once the vaccine was introduced, in the case of Canada it was quite early in the late 1940s, once the vaccine was introduced you saw a fairly steady decline in the incidence of pertussis overall, and then a kind of a wobbly thing there. And this is actually a resurgence of pertussis. It's happened in just about every country, and it's associated not so much with the introduction of acellular pertussis vaccine, because it actually happened before that, the introduction of the acellular vaccine. In fact, it's associated with the changing epidemiology, whereby young women who are giving birth to children, in this case in the 1990s, themselves had never seen whooping cough as a disease, had simply been vaccinated in infancy and had no remaining immunity by the time they became pregnant. And so they themselves are susceptible, as are the infants. And this produced a kind of a different type of epidemiology, which is now becoming more common around the world. And on top of that, we have I think the known fact that the efficacy of the whole cell vaccine is superior to the acellular vaccine. So as countries moved to the acellular vaccine, pertussis epidemiology became more unstable. In Australia, US and UK, maternal pertussis immunisation has been recommended since 2012. But it's actually introduced as this vaccine, diphtheria, tetanus and acellular pertussis. And there's no reason in those countries to give diphtheria and tetanus, but there just isn't a product to give to pregnant women that is purely acellular pertussis. There is one in development, and that will probably be changed within the next year or two. And it's usually recommended that the vaccine should be given in the third trimester, although the UK has now recommended that that should be earlier. And the timing is usually based on this type of a graph, really. The transfer of IgG, the transplacental transfer of antibody in the normal pregnancy, predominantly takes place after 28 weeks, so in the third trimester of pregnancy. So the idea was, well, you should vaccinate women in the third trimester of pregnancy, and then you'll get the best transfer of antibody. Now, this was questioned by a Swiss group recently, who took the view that it's probably better to vaccinate earlier than that and get a more mature immune response before the transfer of antibody starts. And this was work done by Claire-Anne Siegrist in Geneva, and what she did was comparing vaccination in the second trimester with the third trimester, and what you can see for the anti-FHA antibodies here on the right is that antibody transfer was significantly better in the second trimester for those vaccinated in the second trimester than the third trimester. And this, I believe, is the reason why the British have moved towards vaccinating in the second trimester. The British experience is probably the best, and this funny graph that the British public health people put out every year tracks coverage of maternal pertussis vaccination by year since it was introduced in 2012. And in the early years, they got about 50 to 60% coverage. And in the last, in 2016, it got up to about 75 or 80%, and the purple line at the top represents 2017. It's sitting at around 75% coverage. So they have a very strong maternal immunisation program. And they did publish data which suggested that the effectiveness in preventing tetanus, in preventing pertussis was over 90% based on these numbers. And I don't doubt that the strategy is effective, but I think that we have to also take account of what else is going on in the community. And if you look at pertussis in the UK in all age groups, shown on the bottom here, you can see there was a peak in 2012, which then declined naturally by 2013 and 14. So this would have automatically reduced the number of infant cases, which is actually the top blue curve here, anyway, despite that strategy. But nevertheless, a fairly detailed analysis showed that this strategy was effective at the individual level. A couple of comments now about a couple of comments about pneumococcus. And I can say that I'm aware of at least 10 maternal immunisation studies of pneumococcus, including one that we just completed in Australia and one which has just started in Gambia. But I want to just show you a couple of data from one study, from somebody who's actually probably quite well known in the Philippines, particularly amongst more experienced paediatricians here, and that's Ian Riley, who is an Australian who has done quite a lot of work here over many years. And in Ian's thesis, dated 1979, he included a lot of very innovative ideas as far as control of pneumococcal disease. And one of those was maternal immunisation. And in the context of a vaccine trial that he undertook in Papua New Guinea in the mid-1970s, he then followed up those women who were pregnant at the time of the vaccination. They had some who received the pneumococcal vaccine, polysaccharide vaccine, and some received the control vaccine. And the first analysis was a bit disturbing because there seemed to be more pneumonia deaths in the pneumococcal group. But when he analysed it in more detail, he found that there was quite strong evidence that the placebo group had more severe pneumonia. And ultimately did a publication which brought this to the world's attention. But probably the most interesting thing about this study, I think, is there was a reduction, a bit of a reduction in pneumonia in those children whose mothers were vaccinated during the pregnancy. In other words, when the child was in utero at the time of vaccination. But in the children who were already born when the mother was vaccinated, who were between 1 and 17 months of age at the time when the mother was vaccinated, there was a significant reduction in pneumonia in those children. So how could that have happened? We're used to seeing maternal immunisation studies telling us about the transfer of antibody from the mother through the placenta to the baby's bloodstream. And these graphs that are coming from one of the studies show that for the red curves are the antibody levels in the mother and the cord blood and then in the infant. And you can see that it's higher in the vaccinated group than the controls, and that this settles down after about 3 months. So the effect should go away after 2 or 3 months. But actually, if you look at breast milk antibody, and I'll show you just some graphs from a study that I was responsible for in the Gambia, where we looked at breast milk antibody in infants whose mothers had been vaccinated with hip vaccine. We were able to show that even as far as 5 months out, breast milk antibody levels had very strong evidence of immunity, in this case to hip. So breast milk might be actually a more effective mechanism of continuing to protect babies as they're breastfeeding once their mothers have been vaccinated. Lastly, I want to say a few words about RSV. It says time's up, but can I complete the RSV? Okay, thank you. RSV disease is incredibly important, and many people would recognise that this is the next big vaccine that's coming. And I think I don't need to tell this audience of the importance of acute bronchiolitis or the other manifestations of RSV disease. It also causes disease, mild disease in older children, but significant disease in the elderly and probably some mortality. The vaccine field has been clouded by the terrible events of 1967, when children received the formalin inactivated vaccine in the United States. And those children who were vaccinated, when they subsequently encountered RSV, had worse disease. And this is from one of the studies. You can see that when there was a small number of children, there were 20 and 21 infected with RSV in the vaccinated and the control group respectively. But out of the 20 children who were vaccinated, 80% of them required hospitalisation, and amongst those 80%, a lot of them required prolonged ventilation, and 2 of the children died. And this event has haunted the RSV field ever since. And in many ways, there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of research done to try and figure out what's the immunological factors associated with this. We think it's a Th2 type of immune response, and certainly it was the production of non-neutralizing antibody that produced an abnormal immune response. There is now a current effort going on in this field, and there are 3 approaches. And I want to distinguish between those 3 approaches. The first approach is passive protection. As paediatricians, you'll all be aware of the product palivizumab, which is a monoclonal antibody, very expensive, has to be given by injection every month during the season. In Australia, we use it only for children with congenital heart disease, basically, and some of the more extreme premature babies, aged premature babies. There is a new long-acting product under development that the children, normal children, in other words, children who aren't particularly high risk for RSV disease, will be getting an injection of this at the beginning of every winter, at least during infancy at least. So that's a kind of like a variation on the usual vaccination approach. The second is an ongoing story with live attenuated RSV vaccine. There are some problems with that, and I don't have time to go into it. The third is the so-called F protein, fusion protein-based vaccines. The fusion protein is the most important antigenic determinant for RSV, and it has 2 conformations, pre and post-fusion. I don't really want to go into the detail. Just to point out that there are a number of different companies now working on vaccines that are addressing the fusion, the F protein. The principal amongst them is probably Novavax. And Novavax is an American company that have made what they call an F nanoparticle vaccine. And it is the only vaccine at the moment in a phase 3 clinical trial. And that clinical trial actually follows a study that was done in the elderly in the United States, which unfortunately showed no efficacy whatsoever. But the maternal immunization study is underway in a number of countries, including the Philippines. The The projected sample size is to be about 8,000. The endpoint is infants, protecting the infants from severe RSV respiratory disease. And I won't say any more about that. So in conclusion, maternal immunisation is a very effective approach, has proven to be an effective approach for tetanus, pertussis and influenza, and it may be effective for these other strategies. We have to wait and see. Thank you for your attention.